Coming up tonight on the Cruise View, the Anthem of the Seas spends some time in the warm sun. She finds a way to head north while going south. And we check out Spectras Cabaret. It's all coming up, so let's set sail. Welcome to day 3 of the Cruise View from on board the Anthem of the Seas, the second in the Quantum class from Royal Caribbean. Today was Wednesday, April 19th, 2017, and of course another sea day for us as we make our way down south to start our stretch of port of calls. Today, our top story, unfortunately, is once again Royal IQ. Haven't really talked about it too much this sailing, because for the most part it was the only thing that was really not up to par when you look at everything going on this sailing. And unfortunately, Royal IQ is once again pretty much the same thing it's been on every sailing we've had it. The big thing today, at least, that was noticeable was the compass was once again not fully functional. It was pretty much like we saw in Harmony, where things are not all there that should be. Things are not entirely accurate, and you really cannot rely on the Royal IQ app for your compass. You must resort to the paper copy. So even if you wanted to get rid of all the paper, go entirely Royal IQ, you're not going to be able to, because there will be things missing. Today, for instance, the men's belly flop competition, entirely missing from Royal IQ. Not listed as a wrong time, not listed there at all. So you would have absolutely no idea what was taking place today when we know it is today. And that is something that you really don't want to miss. Something that, unfortunately, we've seen on several sailings now where the Royal IQ is not completely correct. And unlike Harmony of the Seas, where we could go out several days, see what was happening pretty much to the end of the sailing, Royal IQ is basically slowly loading for the next day. It seems like at most maybe 1 or 2 days in advance are known. And the menus for the main dining room are simply the current menu. So each day it seems to reload. I'm not sure the exact time, if it's at midnight like we saw in previous sailings where it shows on the digital signage at the ship, or if it was something a little later in the day. But at least in the main dining room we are only seeing one menu at a time, and it is simply listed as main dining room menu. And that is the current day's menu each day that it shows up. But the good news is, you really don't need Royal IQ. If you aren't looking for the compass on there because it's not working, you made your reservations ahead of time, you don't need to check the menu on there because there's plenty of TV screens around the ship to do it. There really is not much use to going to Royal IQ. So you can completely avoid it on this sailing, which was something you could not really do well when it came to the Quantum of the Seas. But with the Anthem, the way they're doing things now, you can avoid it entirely, not have any of those problems, and basically have a perfect sailing because, as I've mentioned several times, things have been going incredibly smooth. Royal IQ is the only hiccup really left in things. So our location today, as I mentioned, it was the second of our sea days headed down south. Our noontime location was 27 degrees and 12 minutes north by 68 degrees and 51 minutes west. Closest land at that time was San Salvador, roughly 355 nautical miles away at that time, and we were roughly 440 nautical miles away from San Juan, Puerto Rico at noon, so pretty much we had a distance to go to any kind of land. And as for our weather, as I mentioned yesterday, things were improving as the day went on, and that continued today for the most part, at least. We had a sunrise this morning at 6:08 a.m. with a sunset tonight at 6:57 p.m. And we had a very beautiful day out. Pretty much everybody seemed to be out on the pool deck today because it was an incredible day to be out there. We had temperatures in the low 70s, but it did feel very warm. Felt much warmer than the low 70s, and at times it probably did get up higher than that. We had partly cloudy skies, but for the most part it was blue skies, just a couple patchy clouds around that you really didn't even notice cross over the ship at all. It was pretty much a bright sunny day the entire day. And we had just a moderate breeze flowing over the ship with slight seas. It seemed very smooth in the morning, but as things went on throughout the day, as often happens on these cruises, the weather conditions change, and as the day wore on, the seas started to look a little bit rougher. And I'm not certain, but I've heard that it did rain tonight as well. So the conditions obviously kind of degraded as the day went on, and right now you can kind of feel the ship moving a little bit, so there's definitely some seas moving out there that weren't there this morning when things were absolutely perfectly smooth and calm. So, moving on to our compass summary then. What did people do with such a beautiful day? As I mentioned, for the most part, they were all out on that pool deck. And for me, my day started outside at 9:30 a.m. with a ride on the North Star, the second one of the sailing. First one, of course, was in Cape Liberty, New Jersey on the first day. Today was the first one of the sailing that I've done at sea, something I had done several times in the Quantum of the Seas. And this is the one that I actually had the reservation for that I made ahead of time. So it was at 9:30, made this reservation probably about 3 months ago, and it was pretty much show up about 10-15 minutes early just to be safe, check in, wait in line, and go right on. It was very smooth, very easy, a whole lot quicker and easier than the old paper reservations they did on the Quantum of the Seas. The one odd thing about the North Star at sea, they have changed the format of it. When we're on the Quantum of the Seas, if you're in port, you just went straight up, straight down. Just looked over the ship, looked over the port, and that was about it. If you're at sea, you would go straight up, and then they would start to bring you down partway and turn roughly maybe 45 degrees off one side of the ship, whichever direction the wind was blowing, just to put a little less stress on the arm, and then move back into the main straight position and lower the rest of the way down. The Anthem is not following that format. She's going completely vertical, then she's rotating about 45 degrees in the one direction, turning all the way to 45 degrees in the other direction, then back to center and going back down. So you really never get a chance to go over the side of the ship. You are at a slight angle when vertical. It's not a complete straight up and down when the North Star goes vertical, so you do move slightly to left and right, but you're never actually over the side of the ship. You remain above the ship deck at all times during the ride. And this is the exact same format of the ride they did when in Cape Liberty the other day. So I don't know if they did it to try to make things a little fair, because you could make reservations at sea or port, so now everybody gets the same exact ride no matter where they make the reservation for. Or if it was more of a technical reason they had to change it. We may find out later in this sailing, hopefully. But either way, it is a different ride than was available in the Quantum of the Season. One that's a little bit less interesting. It was certainly a neat experience on the Quantum to be over the side of the ship and just look down at the waves breaking off of the bow and pretty much look at your own ship sailing through the ocean, which you don't really get that experience when you're on the North Star and the Anthem. You still can look down on the ship, see everything that's going on, get a bird's eye view. That is something you cannot get on any other ship outside the Quantum class. But you can't truly feel like you're off the ship watching your own cruise ship sail through the ocean like you could when you went off the side of the ship on the Quantum. So after that, I spent the day enjoying that sun, walking around the top deck, getting some nice photos, and more importantly, I enjoyed the outside back deck and the Windjammer twice today, both for breakfast and lunch, and it was an absolutely beautiful place to just sit out, watch the ocean go by, just enjoy that perfect weather while you eat your breakfast, lunch, or even dinner, and it was empty. People, I don't think, are really aware of it, because the inside was absolutely packed, not a single table in there, yet there was plenty of room out on the back deck if you wanted to eat out there. And not only do you get the advantage of sitting outside, but during breakfast we actually spotted a whale that was sailing opposite the ship and past us. Not often you see a whale when you're headed down to the Caribbean, but we saw one today. You could see it very clearly off the side of the ship. It was slapping the ocean with its tail the entire time, and sure, most of those people that were inside the Windjammer didn't notice it. Walking around the ship, I haven't really found anyone that's noticed it. I don't think anyone outside of those of us that were in that back deck actually saw that whale that was sailing or swimming past the ship at that time. Then at 1:30, as I mentioned earlier, was the International Men's Belly Flop Competition. This took place in the main pool outside on the pool deck, and it was a decent crowd. It seemed like everybody really wanted to see that one. The bottom deck had tons of people, and the top deck all the way around there were people standing to watch it, so a nice sized crowd certainly turned out. The outside pool deck in the Quantum class, of course, very tiny compared to the Freedom class, Voyager class, some of the other Royal Caribbean class of ships that are just known for massive pool decks. So there is not a whole lot of room out on that deck, but it certainly was a full deck to come check that event out, as it often is for these belly flop competitions. And that, of course, was hosted by Drew, the cruise director.
Pretty sure I saw him close his knees and twist to protect himself, realizing in midair that the simulated plastic gold medal may not be worth this area.
So after that, I once again spent some time taking in the sights of the Anthem of the Seas today on this warm sea day, and checked out some of those seas that were getting a little bit rougher towards the end of the day. All leading up to 5:30, which was our dinner time once again, and today we did have a smart casual, something the Anthem has not had lately. I checked the previous 12-night sailings compasses. They did not have any smart casual. It was purely casual, 2 formal nights. Harmony, of course, had a couple smart casual on our transatlantic, and that's been something that's a little bit rare lately, but it certainly seems like the Anthem of the Seas has it. There, of course, was all sorts of controversy about 2 weeks ago about shorts allowed in the dining room, and then Royal Caribbean reversed it and really kind of threw the whole dining dress code up in the air again and added a bit of confusion to it, and it seems like this is probably a step in them trying to kind of wrangle it back in and standardize things, because they do actually have a listing on their site of how many casual, smart casual, and formal you should have on each sailing based on the length of it, and that has not traditionally been followed the past couple of years. So this may be them moving in a direction of standardizing that and getting it actually enforced finally. So for my dinner at least though, what I ate, it was a menu that had several items that were on the Harmony of the Seas, a couple items that were tweaked, and it was not the same menu, so they are certainly using new menus, or at least different menus on the Anthem of the Seas compared to the Harmony of the Seas. They have many of the same dishes, some of them paired with similar dishes from the other sailing, but they are not the same exact menus. And for today at least, I did not see any starters, so I once again went with that French onion soup. And then for my entree, I went with a dish that I had on the Harmony of the Seas, the beef bourguignon, which was presented very differently than it was on the Harmony of the Seas. The Harmony presented it with the rice right on a square plate and a big piece of bacon across the top of it. The Anthem today presented in a nice bowl, and it was a little bit more mixed together, a lot more sauce, a lot more meat than you had on the Harmony of the Seas. And the rice was actually presented in a separate dish alongside that you could then mix in. So it was a much more presentable and a lot more food to it than the Harmony's dish offered. And then for my dessert today, I went with another one that I had, of course, on the Harmony of the Seas. This one was one that was pretty much a complete rethink of the dessert on the Harmony. It was the dessert that I raved about on the Harmony of the Seas. It was probably the best one on that entire sailing. It was the dark chocolate brownie, something that was presented in a little cup with chunks of brownie, it seemed like half-baked brownie batter, and then some marshmallow, and of course the sea salt caramel over top. Well, today it was not even close to that. It was almost as if somebody described a concept of a dish and 2 different chefs came up with what that meant. And today's was certainly good. It was absolutely nothing wrong with it, but it was not the same exact thing. Today's was actually a much bigger one. That was something on the Harmony. That dessert was delicious, but it was teeny tiny to the point where the waiter actually brought 2 of them over on the first delivery without even being asked to, because he knew it would be too small. So that could be the reason behind it, but today's dish was huge. It was a big cup filled with mousse, and then on top of that chocolate mousse were the brownie chunks, as well as a lot more marshmallow, and then sea salt caramel. And when I got on the Harmony of the Seas, I actually asked for vanilla ice cream on the side to go with it, as well as some sea salt caramel to put on it, just to give a little something extra and to break up all that chocolate. And on the Anthem today, as soon as I ordered it, the waiter immediately asked, "Do you want ice cream on it?" So even that is something that they have now learned. People kind of want on this dish and are now offering immediately. So it's one of those dishes that it's not exactly the same. It's different. It's a good dish. I'm not sure it's as good. It's not bad in any way. It's just a different dish. It's not one I would really have given the exact same name because it is not the same dish. And if you expected the one from Harmony, you would not be very happy with the one that you got, but it was certainly a good dish. If it was named anything else, it would have been a great dish. And there was one that certainly learned from the little issues the Harmony's dish had, which was too small and needing that ice cream, and both of those were taken care of on this one. And then after dinner, we had another night of shows. They had a showing of The Gift tonight, which I did not go to. Rare thing for me to skip one of those shows. But I did go to Spectras Cabaret twice, at both 9 o'clock when I did not have a reservation, and 10:45 when I did have a reservation. I've now seen it 3 times. Of course, saw it once yesterday, sat in 3 different places. Yesterday was right over there on the balcony up here, first row, looking down over the show. Second showing, I was kind of in the middle of the theater in the top section at the tables where a lot of people eat for the 270 Cafe. And then the third showing, I was right down in the front row, somewhere that I sat for Starwater, of course, in the Quantum of the Season. I absolutely loved that spot for that show. So 3 different locations, 3 completely different experiences, just like Starwater did. When you're in here, every location sort of showcases a different feature of the venue. Up top, you can really take in everything that's going on, but you lose some effects of it. In the back, the Vistoramas and the robo-shows, of course, really shine. You see every detail of it. You're at the right perspective for those robo-shows to really be perfect for you. And then, of course, down low, you get all the action of the dancers right up, right in your face, right there. Something that I was actually surprised about, because watching it last night up here, I thought for sure that would not exist. I thought for sure that front row would not be the place. That would just be the most incredible experience like Starwater offered. But it turned out it still was, and it was actually a little more in your face than Starwater was, something I did not expect, because it seemed like for the most part the dancers were up on the platforms, but there were many times they were right on the floor, right up, right in your face when you're in that front row. So it's truly an immersive and incredible experience just to be down in that front row. And one of those places that if you're seeing it once, don't go there. You will not get to enjoy the entire show because there's stuff behind you and above you can't see well. But if you get to see it twice, you must try it from there one time, because it is absolutely incredible when you're in these 270 venues. And as for Spectras Cabaret itself, it was a very different show than Starwater. I'm not even sure you can really compare it to Starwater. I wouldn't recommend comparing it to Starwater because there's very little they have in common. Starwater was the most beautiful show I have ever seen. It was absolutely incredible show to see, and it was very focused on the talent, and really it showed what 270 could do, but mostly the Vistoramas. There was almost no robots involved. This show was almost the exact opposite. It was all about the robots more than anything. The robots were pretty much in action the entire show. They were in every single scene. There were even a couple of parts where it was about a minute or 2, you were doing nothing but watching the robots. There was nothing else going on in the venue, nobody else really out there. You were focused on those robots. In fact, there's an entire scene that is nothing but a video playing on the robots while a singer sings off to the side. So the robots really shined and took center stage in this one, and actually overshadowed the cast in this, something that I couldn't say on any of the other shows on Harmony of the Seas, but in this case, technology really did kind of overshadow the cast. The cast was certainly present. They were very powerful. They had a lot of scenes, and a big difference between Starwater. Starwater was very slow moving, a lot of beautiful stuff, and a lot of just focused elements. You would watch a single dancer perform or a single aerialist perform. It seemed like with Spectras Cabaret, everything was everywhere. When you were watching it, it was massive dance scenes in everyone. When they had an aerialist, there were 2 or 3 sets of aerialists out there at a time. It seemed like every time something was going on, they were trying to put more out there. Starwater, of course, had the one instrument that would float around the theater and pop up in different places throughout the show. For Spectras Cabaret, there were drums, there were all different kinds of things, a saxophone, so there was music all around the theater. It was pretty much everything Starwater up to level. But the one big difference between Starwater and Spectras Cabaret, where Starwater was that beautiful show, Spectras Cabaret, you could tell, was the next generation of different thinking. Starwater, now looking back on it after seeing this, it's very clear that that was kind of a traditional Royal Caribbean concept brought into the 270 venue and adapted to 270. When you watch Spectras Cabaret, you can tell this thing was built from the ground up for 270. It showcases all the technology of it. It really is a show designed around this venue from the ground up entirely. And the main reason for that is probably because when Starwater was created, this didn't exist. They didn't have robots to see what could they do, what effects worked, what didn't work. They had nothing to test concepts and prove anything. They were pretty much going into that ship blindly with a couple little test scenarios and some computer animations, but they didn't have any actual venue to truly test the concept, test how the show will work out, to know what any of these things will really feel like in person. But once they got to Spectras Cabaret, they had 6 months of the quantum sailing. They got all that experience in there, and I'm sure they used all that to really come up with a show because it really pushes the boundaries of what 270 is. It is an absolute tech demo of a show to really showcase this venue and what it is capable of, something that Starwater certainly did, but nowhere near to this extent. And since I did go to both of those, I did not get to attend the Groovy Town tonight. I tried to stop in for a couple minutes, but did not stick around very long because, of course, I was at Starwater twice, and if you watch the quantum sailings, or even the Harmony ones, you know I'm not a big fan of the Groovy Town concept. It seemed very similar from the little bit I saw today to what we saw in the Quantum of the Seas. So, of course, I skipped that for Starwater. But following that second showing of Starwater, I did head to the Royal Theater to check out a late-night adult comedy with Jim David, who, of course, performed the other night. And as I mentioned before, we did see him on the Quantum of the Seas during that sailing. Tonight's adult comedy, for the most part, seemed to be an exact copy of what we saw in the Quantum of the Seas. It seemed to blend together his adult show from that sailing, along with a couple elements from his main show, because he was a full-length show on that sailing, where this one was the welcome show, which shortens his set a bit. But it was a great show, the bit that I saw, at least the end of it. And the one thing I really liked about Jim David, as I'm sure I mentioned on the Quantum of the Seas, it was an adult show, but it wasn't an adult show for the sake of being an adult show. It was just great comedy, and he just turned his filters off and let everything roll. And it, of course, was a hilarious show, something that you want anytime there's a comedian, and anytime they can just naturally flow with it and not make it overly uncomfortable or seem forced to be adult in nature. It's a great show, and that, of course, was what Jim Davis did today. So that did it for the Compass. That led us actually till midnight. It was all the way to midnight that there was all this entertainment going on around the ship. And after that now, of course, the ship has started to go to sleep. We do have that port tomorrow. So that about does it for today. Of course, that's second sea day, heading down south. Tomorrow we arrive in San Juan, Puerto Rico, our first port of call. Unlike traditional one, though, we will not be there at 7 a.m. We won't watch the sunrise over the island. Instead, we'll be getting there at about 3 p.m. According to the captain, we should see land on the horizon about 1 p.m. It'll take us about a half hour to dock, so probably about 2:30, maybe somewhere before there. We'll start to enter the harbor and, of course, be docked roughly 3 p.m. And we won't be alone. The Brilliance of the Seas will also be in port, so we'll have a nice Royal Caribbean friend to meet us there, and hopefully we'll get a horn battle with the two ships as well. So that about does it for today. Once again, I'm Derek Cohn. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for the links.